Kitco News special coverage of the Bank of Montreal's 32nd Global Metals, Mining and Critical Minerals Conference is brought to you by First Majestic Silver.
This is Kitco News. I'm Michelle Makori coming to you from Hollywood, Florida for the Bank of Montreal's Global Mining, Metals and Critical Minerals Conference, where over 1,200 industry leaders have gathered, including Amir Adnani. Amir, great to have you with us.
Great to reconnect. Holly, the second you said Hollywood, I thought, where are we? And then I realized it's Florida.
Hollywood, Florida.
Hollywood, Florida.
That's where we are. Take a
Good
look
intro.
outside. We've got the beach, We've got the sea, we've got you. And as a reminder to our viewers, you are, of course, the CEO, founder, director, and president of Uranium Energy Corp, and the founder and co-chairman of Gold Mining Inc. So, Amir, I want to start off with interesting news out of Japan today, where there is a sentiment shift, a paradigm shift, if you will, in terms of the acceptance of nuclear energy. And keeping in mind that it's 12 years since the Fukushima disaster in Japan. And now we've got Japan's Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, coming out and saying that he plans to restart more reactors in the country that have been standing idle since 2011. He's one of several world leaders that are looking to do this. But of course, it's particularly interesting to see this development in Japan, which suffered that Fukushima disaster. And it's not just at the governmental level. We have public support for this. According to local polls in Japan, 51% of the public support restarting nuclear power stations. So, Amir, when you look at this shift in sentiment and this paradigm shift, what do you make of that?
There isn't an expert or policymaker or a climate scientist that hasn't looked at the issues around the need to decarbonize and conclude that nuclear energy has to play a role in the mix of energy sources that can help us achieve the climate goals and objectives that we have while meeting the energy needs of 9.5 billion people on this planet. The data points that you refer to are quite profound because Japan is a very important piece of this equation. And more important than the political will that the Prime Minister demonstrated in Japan is that public opinion poll that you referred to. Because people that are being interviewed in Japan in some of these articles and polls really refer back to the energy bills that they've seen skyrocket over the last year. And the issues around energy and national security since Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been top of mind, not only for folks and people in Japan, but all around the world. If you're in Western Europe, I was just traveling recently, meeting with our investors in the UK. People literally, I mean, you say to them anecdotally, how much are you paying for electricity? What's your energy bill at the end of the month? 4x increase, 5x increase. This starts to add up. People in Japan started to notice the exact same thing. But you have this issue of national security really converging at the exact same time that we genuinely need to decarbonize. And in order to make this green energy transition, we need to have access to low carbon fuel sources like uranium. So I have, in my 20 years in the uranium industry, never seen a setup this constructive and positive for our industry and for nuclear energy that really combines and underpins wide public opinion polls in support of nuclear energy in the US as well as Japan, which is driving this bipartisan support and interest from policymakers, but then also incredible technological innovations from the industry, the rise and advancements of small modular reactors and how they can play a significant role in not only being a large reactor that typically would cost a lot and would take many years to build, but manufactured really at off-site and delivered to and be installed in remote locations. Small and advanced modular reactors are another very exciting arena.
Well, let's talk about that, because obviously you have people feeling the pain of high electricity bills and people feeling the pain of this movement to decarbonize being translated in them not actually having the energy that they need. And they're potentially forsaking the concerns that are typically associated with nuclear energy stations. Has that been alleviated by advancements in technology? How far have we come in the 12 years since Fukushima in terms of genuinely allaying the concerns of accidents like that happening?
Well, I think safety is the number one area to talk about. Not only were nuclear reactors safe to begin with before the Fukushima incident. But after a decade of studying what happened at the Fukushima incident, we now have evidence that shows not only were there no fatalities related to the Fukushima Daiichi reactors, but rather the ability of these reactors to close down and contain after many years of being able to see data has proven to actually have been responsible and effective. On top of that, though, the industry globally focused on safety for many, many years post-Fukushima. And beyond that, went on to really stress test the questions around how do we make this incredible power generating capacity that nuclear energy has available cheaper, faster, and deploy more quickly while maintaining safety. And so this is where companies like TerraPower that are backed by Bill Gates and others, entrepreneurs out of Silicon Valley that are backing up-and-coming technology companies that are bringing the next generation of nuclear technology to market. This has been a total game changer. The Nuclear Energy Institute in the US predicts that we'll see a doubling of nuclear capacity in the United States in the next 20 years because of deployment of SMRs. Again, in the 2 decades, small modular reactors. Okay. So in the last couple of decades, we never saw this kind of growth projection in the US. It was always seen that nuclear energy was an answer to the needs of emerging markets. And now it's very clear that it's an answer to France's energy needs. It's an answer to energy needs in developed economies, in addition to the emerging market needs. And it's our best solution for keeping the air clean and really having a solution that can help reduce global temperatures.
Beyond the greenification idea, one of the catalysts driving demand for nuclear energy has been Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the issue with oil supplies there. It's been exactly a year since Russia invaded Ukraine. And yet I was surprised to learn that there are no sanctions on Russia's uranium supplies and that the US actually uses, you said 60%, gets 60% of its uranium from Russia?
60% of imports into the United States were from Russia, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan. And most uranium that goes into Russia is converted and enriched further before it is exported out. Suffice to say, the reason why uranium hasn't been sanctioned yet is really due to this incredible dependence that clearly the West and the US has on this material. Suffice to say, I think if you're thinking about and looking at the commodity sector, there isn't another potential catalyst as ban on Russian uranium imports into the US that can potentially really move a commodity. I don't know of any other commodity, and it's been discussed at this conference. As you know, this is a conference where all the major institutional investors and mining companies are here. I think the analysts at BMO had picked uranium as one of its top commodities or the top commodity, especially because of this attribute where uranium and what's driving uranium right now is decoupled from economic realities. Whether we're in a recession or going into a recession won't change the fact that sanctions on Russian uranium imports will shake this market and cause upward pressure on the uranium price. So when we look at the fact that now there's real evidence that Russia's nuclear energy company, Rosatom, has been involved in military action, which has been reported by the Ukrainian delegation in Washington, the Washington Post, this starts to definitely point in the direction that we probably will see sanctions. It's a question of when, not if. And in fact, just 48 hours ago, some individuals that are executives of Rosatom, again, Russia's nuclear energy company, were placed on US sanctions list. So again, it's something that might be going under the radar screens of most people.
So individuals involved in Russia's uranium program are now on the sanctions, but so far no sanctions on the company and on imports coming in from Russia. What were to happen if those sanctions are implemented? How do you see that playing out?
Well, look, the U.S. is the largest consumer of uranium in the world. They consume 50 million pounds per annum. There's zero domestic production capabilities right now.
Zero domestic production.
Right. So let's talk about a commodity with a supply-demand fundamentals like that. Zero supply, 50 million pounds of demand. So suffice to say, it could be very disruptive to the market if there were a ban or a sanction on these imports. But that's the price to pay. The price ultimately to pay here is one that allows a domestic industry to be developed. And if we sit here and continue to think that Russia could be a reliable supplier of uranium while it's waged a war and caused a significant humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, then that's not right either. Of course, the issue here also has to do with the fact that the world, including the US, including the West, felt and believed for many decades that Russia was going to be responsible and reliable. And now more than ever, Western utilities are trying to diversify away from Russia. Vattenfall in Sweden has voluntarily canceled their supply contracts with Russia. In Poland and Czech Republic, they're talking about replacing Russian supplies with Western supplies that have traceability and accountability and sustainability around how they plan to mine uranium, not engage in the acts of war and supporting military operations.
I have to circle back on this zero domestic production, because that seems kind of astounding, especially considering that obviously uranium is not just used for nuclear power, nuclear energy, but also for nuclear weapons. And it's clearly a matter of national security. How is there zero domestic uranium production?
First of all, this is decades in the making. After the end of the Cold War, the US decided to sign a treaty with Russia to dismantle Soviet-era warheads. And that dismantled uranium that came out of those warheads became a cheap source of uranium for many, many years and destroyed the domestic industry in the US. A very important sign that speaks to your point that the US government is as concerned as you are right now and talking about that is the launch of the Strategic Uranium Reserve. This is history in the making. Very recently was the very first purchase by the US government of uranium for the government account to create the Strategic Uranium Reserve, modeled after the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. If this doesn't tell you that the US government is equally concerned about this vulnerability of no domestic capability, I don't know what will. The last time the US government purchased uranium for the government account was the 1950s in the Eisenhower administration. And just a small plug for my company, we were awarded a piece of that business. So I'm very proud to say that after 18 years of building uranium energy, believing that the national security issue was an area that we wanted to address, just a few weeks ago, we successfully closed that award and delivered uranium into the US government for the maiden Strategic Uranium Reserve.
And where are you producing the uranium?
We provided that uranium from stockpiles that we had acquired through our inventory program. We were eligible to sell that to the US government from inventory because the production hasn't started because we're seeking a higher uranium price to restart production. So because we're a past US uranium producer, because we're a US uranium company, because we met all the eligibility requirements to deliver this uranium to the US government, we were awarded this contract. But that wasn't, again, from production, but it was from our inventory that we had.
Because it's still not economically viable for you to start up actual uranium production.
We're seeking a $60 uranium price on a sustained basis in the spot market to restart production. Today, the spot price is at $51 per pound. But in fact, the uranium that we sold to the Department of Energy, the US government, they purchased from us at just about $60 per pound. So it's also further validation. It's a data point that US uranium prices will fetch a premium, because that's a 20% premium to the current spot market. And that in fact, prices are most likely heading in that direction. Because to purchase 1 million pounds of uranium, the US government had to pay $60 per pound. That was the clearing price. US demand, as I mentioned, is 50 million pounds per year. So I think there's a very strong argument there.
And uranium is currently at around
about $50 per pound.
$50.
Yeah.
It's actually down around 12% a year to date. With all of these factors, how is this not being reflected in the uranium market?
With all of these factors, the uranium prices should be north of $100 per pound. The reality is, over the last couple of years, they have already doubled. And uranium prices were as low as $25 per pound. And it's one of the best performing commodities. As you know, with any asset class, things don't just go up in a straight line. There are periods of pullback and consolidation. But the fundamentals in the uranium sector today, where we have a supply deficit, we have countries like Japan coming back, doing a total 180 on nuclear energy, all point to the fact that we need more uranium supplies that are not being built at $50 uranium. And historic uranium prices adjusted for inflation point to $100 to $150 plus per pound. In a world where we need uranium badly to keep nuclear power plants running, to get that carbon-free electricity, there's no doubt in my mind that prices, to your point, will go higher. And it's just a question of, again, when, not if.
And again, to throw another factor in here, a negative one, but we also have Russia pulling out of the START treaty, which is a nuclear arms reduction treaty with the United States. So from a national security perspective, if you're the US, worst case scenario is something you need to start, I would hope, planning and preparing for, and bolstering uranium supplies.
What's interesting about that point is actually, and you're bang on about the fact that what that kind of brings us back to is we're solely focused on potential US sanctions on Russia. But what Russia has done recently with the START treaty that you alluded to also suggests that we may see Russian counter sanctions before we may see US sanctions. Because look, at the end of the day, if you're Russia, your sale of uranium or nuclear fuel to the US constitutes about $2 billion of annual revenue. That's small compared to the strategic pain you can inflict on an entire market for electricity generation. 20% of US electricity generation is nuclear power. And so can't take your eyes also off of counter sanctions, which is something that Russia has shown it will play that card if needed.
It's quite likely that before the US even contemplates fully sanctioning Russia, Russia will say, no, US, we're not selling you our uranium.
It's completely logical to think that could happen because it's happened on other commodities and areas with Russia since their Ukraine invasion.
So what would be the alternatives for the United States if you're saying that companies such as yours need uranium at above $60 to justify the costs of active operation? I'm assuming this is the baseline for other producers?
Many producers that are building new mines will need even higher uranium prices. We benefit from the fact that our US projects are built, licensed, and not in a stage where upfront capital needs to be deployed to build the assets. We have fully built and operational and licensed processing plants and infrastructure in Texas and Wyoming. So we are more of a production restart with past production history, and so much more proven compared to a company that's undergoing permitting and will have a higher cost of capital and will still need to finance the upfront construction-related capital. So I think at the end of the day, companies that have production restart opportunities like ours will most likely work with that $60 hurdle. But I think prices will need to be well north of that for incentivizing brand new operations. Look, at the end of the day, uranium is less than 5% of the operating cost of a nuclear power plant. That's the good news. And in the Inflation Reduction Act, billions of dollars of tax credits were given to utilities, and they are now in the best and strongest financial shape they've ever been in, including receiving 20-year license extensions to operate the plants. What that means is that ultimately a move in the uranium price will make very little difference to the bottom line of the end user and the ratepayer, and higher prices will ultimately be the cure. It will incentivize new development. I am confident that this will lead to the rebirth of an incredible industry. The US used to lead the world in uranium mining. Tens of thousands of jobs used to exist here in exploration, development, and mining of uranium. Today, there's probably a few hundred people left employed in this industry. But just think about all the jobs that can be created.
Why was that change? What made that change
The end of the
happen?
Cold War. The end of the Cold War that I was talking about. When the Cold War ended and the switch to dismantled Soviet-era warheads, again, that really destroyed the industry. And we're really going back to a world where I think the prioritization over controlling our own energy supply chains is what's driving policy and economic rationale. And in that environment, domestic capabilities and domestic uranium mining, I think will really win the day.
And in terms of securing supply chains and ensuring that you have access to what you need, we're seeing a curious development here at the Bank of Montreal conference in that we have a number of car companies here, Tesla, Ford, to name a few. They're looking at sourcing some critical minerals directly, like lithium, some even getting involved in copper and copper production, copper mines. So we're seeing this trend of vertical integration. Are we likely to perhaps see this happening with uranium as well, with the end users coming to conferences like this and trying to secure their supply chain as well?
Well, all the lithium and copper and cobalt that's going to go building those batteries for the electric vehicles, they need to be charged, right? These batteries don't just charge themselves. And what we're really going to see is that at the end of the day, uranium is a fuel that very much belongs in energy transition. And energy transition is really this electrification movement. Absolutely, I believe you're going to see that vertical integration in uranium as well. The same Teslas and Ford Motors and Mercedes-Benzes that are here at this conference today, and as you said, it's quite strange, we've never seen this before, are looking to be vertically integrated. And we don't have to look that far. In the 70s, 80s, before the end of the Cold War, end users of uranium were vertically integrated. Oil and gas companies used to be in uranium mining. Utilities used to own uranium mines and mills. And so if we're going back to a playbook, which is a playbook that unfortunately it's a bit about deglobalization and it's a bit about switching away from Russia, then it's not some unknown. We've seen it before, and we've seen what vertical integration is all about. And it's about securing supply. And car makers are doing it, and other end users of these very strategic metals, which uranium is, will do it the exact same way.
Especially if you see this sort of global split. I would imagine several sectors and industries want to insulate themselves and balkanize against tensions not only with Russia, but also with China.
Absolutely.
Well, and yet, how would you think that vertical integration could manifest itself with regards to uranium and perhaps even companies such as yourself?
Well, look, as I mentioned, there's a whole arena of players that haven't entered the uranium industry yet. As I mentioned, major energy companies that are oil and gas focused primarily, as you know, don't look at themselves as oil and gas anymore. They also want to decarbonize. And so when you look at the history of uranium mining in the US, ExxonMobil, Texaco, Chevron, we're all players in uranium mining.
So buying uranium mines, buying uranium mining companies,
Absolutely.
Is that how you see this happening?
I see that happening. I see private equity groups that are energy focused coming back. I see diversified energy companies. I see renewable companies that see how well renewable works alongside nuclear energy. And again, finally, the end users, the utilities that may potentially scramble to secure the uranium once potential Russian supplies are cut off, also will think about security of supply in a much more prioritized way than just sitting back and believing that everything's always readily available.
And yet, surprisingly enough, with all of these developments, your stock is flat year to date, even though since last time we spoke, which was about a year and a half ago, your market cap has gone from around 500 million to 1.3 billion, and you've made several acquisitions. So what's been going on there?
Well, look, we've had tremendous growth over the last few years since we've been interviewing, and also since, let's say, even our COVID lows. During the COVID lows, which wasn't that long ago, we're talking about 3 years ago, our company was trading below $1 a share. Today, we're trading at $3.70 a share. We've had tremendous share price appreciation over the last 3 years. Last year was a very challenging time in the market. For the year 2022, we were up over 20%. This year we're still very early innings of this year, but I think at the end of the day, we have a company that has been most aggressive and acquisitive in the uranium industry because we're putting our money where our mouth is. We believe we're still in a bear market in uranium. This is not a normal functioning market where there's a supply deficit and prices are still below incentive levels. We've done $600 million of acquisitions over the last 12 months. We've accumulated a physical uranium position. We've grown our company into Canada. We're now in the US with our in-situ recovery business, but also in Canada's Athabasca Basin, where the highest grade uranium deposits are. And this North American footprint, I believe, is what we need right now. It's about being in geopolitically stable jurisdictions to be a reliable supplier to Western customers. And so I think the strategy not only has resonated, but again, has delivered share price performance over the last few years and over the last year. But also it's really positioned us as one of the top 5 largest uranium companies by way of total resources. We're the largest in the United States by way of total permitted resources for production and licensed production capacity. And as you pointed out, that has also translated to market cap growth and has allowed us to also attract attention and interest from bigger investors. And look, I'm really proud of our team. I mean, we have a team that has been at this for 20 years. Some of our more seasoned individuals have been in this industry for 40 years. It's been a difficult goal in the uranium business, but our commitment hasn't wavered. And it was a very proud moment for us to be a supplier of uranium to the US government, to the Department of Energy, to contribute very directly to national security and energy security. And this is just the beginning. The US government purchasing, for example, is a $1.5 billion program, or expected to be. And this was just a $60 million purchase and very initial
Did the stock
purchase.
move on that news?
It did, actually. The day we announced that, I believe we were up about 10%, or as much as that.
So what is your outlook for your stock for the rest of the year?
Look, I think, as you can appreciate from perhaps the enthusiasm in my voice, again, as I mentioned, I have, in the 20 years as an entrepreneur in this industry, have not seen the fundamentals as strong as they are right now. And those that have been in the industry for 40 years will tell you they haven't seen the fundamentals this strong in 40 years. We're at an all-time best in terms of the fundamental underpinnings of nuclear energy and uranium.
They're not necessarily positive fundamentals, but positive in terms of what they could do to uranium companies and the uranium price. Do you have an outlook of where you expect uranium spot price to be?
I really believe it needs to be above incentive price levels, and we're not there yet. We haven't seen it at 50. If we adjust the uranium price from the 2011 pre-Fukushima level, adjust that for inflation, today it would be about $100 per pound. If we adjust the price from the 07 high of $140 per pound, it should be about $200 per pound. If the uranium price goes to $100 to $200 per pound, will people's electricity bill go up? No. Will it make a big difference to the bottom line of the end user? No. You have price inelasticity, which makes me so bullish compared to other commodities, which may be impacted with an economic slowdown or recession. I think if you're an investor, you're looking for a sector that truly could be decoupled and be recession-proof. Uranium offers very unique fundamentals. And it's also a commodity that was in the toilet for 10, 11 years, more so than any other commodity.
But in your models, your pricing models, as you've established, you need it to be above $60 to make it viable to resume production.
Yeah.
What is your estimate for where you realistically expect the price of uranium to be by the end of this year?
I don't have that kind of crystal ball. As I mentioned to you, I really feel we're in for a very strong year for uranium. I'd be very happy if we get over 60 so we can restart our operations and we can scale into higher prices with very scalable operations that we have. I think you've heard my thoughts on where I think it can go. And like I said, it's a very bullish setup.
I'm always trying to get a number for our viewers. But Amir, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. Really appreciate it. Amir Adnani, always good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching Kitco News. I'm Michelle Makori. As always, keep it right here.
Kitco News coverage of the 32nd Global Metals, Mining and Critical Minerals is brought to you by First Majestic Silver.